The civilization of ancient Egypt has long captured the imagination of humanity, and rightly so. Stretching across thousands of years and influencing everything from early Greek philosophy to modern mysticism, Egypt stands as a monument not only of stone, but of story. We marvel at the pyramids, which stood ancient even in Cleopatra's day, and we continue to be stunned by the scientific and philosophical achievements of its people, achievements that laid the very foundation for Western science, mathematics, and esoteric thought. This wasn't merely a civilization, it was a repository of primeval wisdom, an archive of divine knowledge passed down through gods and scribes, mystics and priests. From Imhotep to Hermes Trismegistus, from Victorian Egyptomania to present-day fascination with the Akashic records, Egypt has remained the beating heart of ancient occult knowledge. And at the center of that beating heart is a mysterious, elusive, and powerful god, Thoth. Thoth, often depicted with the head of an ibis or in the form of a baboon, was no ordinary deity. He began, perhaps, as a lunar god, associated with the rhythm and reflection of the moon, but he became so much more. Over the centuries, Thoth evolved into the mediator of the gods, the scribe of heaven, the master of time, the architect of law, the inventor of writing, the judge in the underworld, and the divine wielder of Heka, what we might call magic, though the term fails to do it justice. In a culture that resisted strict theological systems and instead embraced fluid and impressionistic forms of divine identity, Thoth was the great chameleon of the Egyptian pantheon, adapting and expanding to fit the spiritual, intellectual, and magical needs of every age. His name alone tells a story of mystery. The Egyptian language, like all languages, shifted dramatically over time, both in pronunciation and grammar. Early versions of his name may have sounded like Tahuti or Jehuti, and later Greek transliterations would render him as Thoth, a name we still use today. The ancient scribes didn't just write Thoth's name one way. There were at least a dozen different hieroglyphic variations, ranging from the simple depiction of an ibis to more elaborate combinations involving the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice, who is sometimes said to be Thoth's consort. Even today, Egyptologists debate how his name was truly spoken. And maybe that's fitting. Perhaps the god of language deliberately resists being named in any one way. Visually, Thoth appears in many forms, depending on the role he's playing. Sometimes he's the ibis-headed man holding the ankh and the scribe's palette. Other times, he's the lunar baboon, often adorned with a crescent moon on his head. He might wear the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, representing his role as a divine mediator between the warring gods Horus and Set. In some depictions, he carries a reed pen and ink palette, the unmistakable tools of the scribe. And in others, he stands beside the scales in the Hall of Ma'at, ready to record the weight of the soul's heart in the final judgment. Each form speaks to a different aspect of his domain: creation, mediation, wisdom, judgment, healing, and cosmic order. To understand Thoth is to understand that ancient Egypt did not tell its stories in straight lines. There is no single canonical myth that defines Thoth. Instead, he floats like a mist through various myth cycles, appearing in multiple roles that, while sometimes contradictory, always reinforce his significance. He is both scribe and creator, both healer and judge, both divine emanation and independent deity. For instance, in the Osirian myth cycle, the cornerstone of Egyptian religious narrative, it is Thoth who assists Isis in finding and reassembling the dismembered body of her murdered husband Osiris. Most importantly, it is Thoth who uses ritual power, or Heka, to revive Osiris just long enough to father the god Horus. Without Thoth's intervention, there would be no heir, no avenger, and no restoration of divine order. That act alone cements his role not just as an assistant to the gods, but as the one who ensures the continuity of divinity itself. But he doesn't stop there. Thoth also protects the infant Horus, hiding him in the marshes of Chemnus and healing him when he's wounded. He appears as a defender in the courtroom drama of Horus versus Set, standing not only as an advocate for Horus, but also as the keeper of justice itself. When Horus has his eye torn out in a violent confrontation with Set, it is Thoth who finds the shattered pieces, reassembles them, and restores the eye of Horus to its full form. This act of restoration is not only magical, it becomes mathematical. The reconstructed eye, known as the Wedjat, was used as a symbol for Egyptian fractions. Here again we see Thoth operating at the intersection of language, healing, cosmology, and numerology, a deity who doesn't just fix what is broken, but redefines it, makes it sacred, and embeds it into the very structure of reality. His connection to the moon further deepens his complexity. As a lunar deity, Thoth was associated with time, especially in the context of the Egyptian calendar. The first month of the year was named after him. The waxing and waning of the moon were thought to represent wounds that Thoth would heal, mirroring the mythic restoration of Horus's eye. This lunar identity wasn't just symbolic, it tied Thoth to the very mechanism by which Egyptians understood fate and destiny. As the protector and regulator of time, Thoth was said to write the years of the pharaoh's reign into his book of annals. He didn't just record time, he made it. Through his words, kings ruled. Through his script, history flowed. He was not merely a witness to events. He was the divine administrator of them. And in this way, Thoth begins to resemble something even more powerful than a god. He becomes a principle, a force. The very act of perception, cognition, and creation itself. Egyptian texts from various time periods portray him as the heart and tongue of Ra, the sun god. The heart in Egyptian thought was not the seat of emotion, but of mind and awareness. The tongue, of course, was the speaker of thought. In this dual role, Thoth becomes the firstborn mind of the cosmos, the architect of existence, and the divine mechanism by which ideas are made real. He is both the source and the scribe, the origin of divine thought and the recorder of it. He is the mirror by which the universe sees itself. Eventually, Thoth's role expands beyond the boundaries of Egyptian theology. As Greek culture mingled with Egyptian thought, Thoth was syncretized with Hermes, the Greek god of wisdom, travel, and language. This fusion birthed a new figure, Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great Hermes. This wasn't just a simple merger of two mythologies. It was a spiritual reconfiguration. Hermes Trismegistus became the embodiment of all sacred knowledge, an archetype of the sage, the prophet, the philosopher. Under this new identity, Thoth survived the fall of the Egyptian temples. He passed into the libraries of Alexandria, the manuscripts of alchemists, the grimoires of medieval magicians. He became a secret whisper behind the Western mystery traditions, the hidden author of occult wisdom, the voice that echoes through time and glyphs, ink and imagination. And this is where we begin to see the extraordinary legacy of Thoth, not merely as a god of the past, but as a force that continues to inspire seekers today. He is the original scribe, the one who understands the relationship between symbols and power. In his hand, language becomes a tool for shaping reality, not merely describing it. The hieroglyph is not a letter, it is a spell. The word is not a sign, it is an act. And for those who seek truth, who seek knowledge, who seek the arcane, Thoth is more than a figure of mythology. He is a guide. If the first thing Thoth teaches is that reality can be written, then the second thing he reveals is that it can be rewritten through Heka. This ancient Egyptian concept, often mistranslated as magic, is far more profound than the conjuring tricks or fantasy illusions the modern mind might imagine. Heka is the living power of the divine, the primal force used by the gods themselves to shape, heal, and sustain the cosmos. It is not superstition, but sacred technology. Not metaphor, but mechanism. Heka was the operating system of ancient Egypt's spiritual universe, and Thoth was its supreme programmer. Referred to in numerous texts as the Lord of Heka, the one who performs Heka, or simply great in Heka, Thoth doesn't merely use this power, he is inseparable from it. His very name was sometimes used as a determinative symbol in magical spells, indicating that the act itself was under his dominion. This power was not theoretical, it was direct, tangible, and vital to the survival of the soul, both in this life and in the perilous journey of the afterlife. Heka was required to repel disease, venom, spiritual attack, and chaos. It was used to heal the body, to sanctify temples, to consecrate rituals, to navigate the duat, the underworld, and to ensure rebirth and deification beyond death. Heka was needed to communicate with the gods, to animate sacred statues, to bless the offerings, and even to empower the spoken word itself. In this magical economy, language had weight, and Thoth was the treasurer. Words were deeds. Speech was creation. Ink was divine fire. Through the sacred texts inscribed under Thoth's guidance, the Egyptians believed they could participate in the maintenance of cosmic order. The myth of the Eye of Horus demonstrates this beautifully. When Horus's eye is torn out by Set, it is Thoth who gathers the pieces, reassembles them, and restores the eye, not only to Horus, but to the heavens. That reconstructed eye, which becomes the Wedjat, is not merely healed, but transformed. It becomes the eye of the moon, the healing light in the night sky, and a symbol of restored order, wholeness, and calculation. In Egyptian mathematics, the components of the Wedjat were used to represent fractions, showing how even numerical systems were imbued with sacred meaning. This is what Heka looks like. It is not sleight of hand or wishful thinking. It is restoration, precision, divine healing, and the fusion of mind, myth, and mathematics into one continuous sacred act. And in every version of this myth, no matter how much the details shift, it is Thoth who makes the healing possible. But Heka was not limited to the myths. It lived in the lives of the people. The priests and scribes who copied and recited the funerary texts, the pyramid texts, the coffin texts, and the Book of Coming Forth by day, did so not as historians, but as magicians. These weren't books to read, they were tools to activate. They were scripts for the soul. Reciting them, even hearing them, was thought to bestow power, guidance, and protection. And behind every one of these incantations, inscriptions, and liturgies stood Thoth. He was said to have authored 42 volumes of divine knowledge, books that covered everything from astronomy to healing, from the laws of the dead to the rituals of the living. Sadly, almost all of these works have been lost, but even their memory retains power. Fragments that survive, particularly in demotic texts, hint at a system of spiritual initiation and priestly training overseen by Thoth himself. The influence of these ideas extended beyond Egypt's borders. The Hellenistic world inherited this magical model of language and divine speech through the fusion of Thoth with Hermes. In the Hermetic texts, the Logos, the creative word, is the ultimate force of transformation, and the one who wields it is the sage who has purified his soul and aligned himself with divine order. That is, essentially, a Greek reframing of Thoth's ancient Egyptian role. He who knows the names of the gods, who speaks the right words at the right moment, who writes not just for history but for heaven. This is the initiate. This is the one who walks with Thoth. And walk with him they did. In Egyptian ritual life, priests often invoked Thoth at the opening of ceremonies, appealing to his authority as the divine scribe and voice of the gods. He was called upon to ensure that the rites were performed correctly, that the hymns were sung in the proper tones, that the measurements of the temple were accurate. He set the blueprint for the temples, the houses of life, and dictated the proportions, layouts, and placements of sacred structures. As the divine architect, Thoth didn't merely design spaces, he encoded them. Every corridor, every wall, every chamber, every pillar was constructed according to sacred mathematics and symbolic alignment. Entering a temple was not just entering a building, it was entering a living book, written in stone, authored by Thoth, and activated through ritual and intention. This architectural dimension of Heka shows just how deep the Egyptian integration of magic, science, and religion truly was. Sacred space was an extension of sacred language, which in turn was an expression of sacred law. And all of it flowed through the pen and voice of Thoth. Even the act of writing, so often taken for granted, was seen as inherently magical. The hieroglyphs themselves, called Medu Necher, or words of the gods, were considered living entities. To write them was to summon their power. To inscribe them on walls, coffins, or papyri was to fix divine reality in place. This is why even the image of Thoth, carved into amulets or painted on ritual objects, was believed to carry power. He was not a symbol, he was a channel, a conduit of Heka, bound to ink, intention, and invocation. In this way, Thoth becomes more than a god, he becomes a model, a blueprint for the initiate. He is the one who knows how to speak when others are silent, how to write when others forget, how to remember when the world falls into darkness. He is the preserver of knowledge in times of crisis, the healer of divine wounds, the counselor in celestial courtrooms. And he is not just limited to the mythic past. His presence lives in every act of writing that seeks truth, every word that heals, every calculation that brings order, every spell that restores the soul to its path. To align with Thoth is to enter a lineage of scribes, priests, architects, and seekers who do not accept the chaos of the world as final, but instead take up the pen or the word or the wand and rewrite it. And it is in this spirit that Thoth was seen as a savior, a rescuer. In the funerary texts, he is often described as the one who lifts the soul with his wings, who guides it through the dark passages of the underworld, who records its deeds and defends it before the tribunal of gods. If the heart of the deceased was too heavy, weighed down by sin or imbalance, Thoth would mark the verdict. But if the soul faltered, if it could not speak in its own defense, Thoth could step forward as advocate, using his voice, his reason, his Heka, to argue on its behalf. He did not merely judge, he interceded. He did not merely observe, he acted. And in the final rituals, like the opening of the mouth ceremony, it was Thoth who helped awaken the soul into eternity, using magic not just as a tool of power, but as a gift of rebirth. For most gods of the ancient world, the end of temples meant the end of worship. The decline of Egypt's native religion was long and complex, marked by Roman conquest, Christian suppression, and the eventual Islamic transformation of the region. By the 5th century of the Common Era, the great temple complexes that had once echoed with invocations to the gods fell silent. The last hieroglyphic inscription was carved around the year 394 CE, and the final Demotic script appeared not long after. With the closure of the Temple of Isis at Philae under the orders of Emperor Justinian in 537, it seemed the gods of Egypt had faded into myth, their statues abandoned, their names forgotten. And yet Thoth endured. How? Through metamorphosis. Through the same adaptability that had always defined him. Thoth, the god of writing, ensured his own survival through the very mechanism he ruled, text. As his temples closed, his identity shifted, He became Hermes Trismegistus in the Hellenistic world, a figure no longer strictly Egyptian, but something hybrid, something transcendent. Hermes Trismegistus was not worshipped in temples, but studied in manuscripts. His words became the source of secret knowledge, passed down in scrolls, grimoires, and philosophical dialogues. And through these texts, Thoth found immortality not in marble or offering bowls, but in ideas. His new temple was the library. His altar, the written page. This transformation was more than symbolic. It marked the migration of sacred authority from priesthood to scholar, from ritual to philosophy. As Hermes Trismegistus, Thoth became the teacher of alchemy, astrology, and spiritual purification. He taught that salvation came through knowledge, gnosis, and that the soul must be cleansed of its worldly illusions to ascend to the divine. In texts like the Corpus Hermeticum, which blended Greek, Egyptian, and later Christian elements, Hermes speaks as a prophet, a philosopher, and a mystic. He reveals the unity of all things, the power of the mind, and the presence of the divine within each human soul. This was not Thoth as he was, but it was Thoth as he needed to become to survive. And survive he did. As Islamic culture absorbed Greek and Egyptian knowledge during the Middle Ages, Hermes Trismegistus was reimagined once more, this time as Idris, a prophet in Islamic tradition, or as Enoch, the scribe of God in Jewish lore. In each case, the core remained, a wise figure who bridges the human and the divine, who reveals sacred knowledge, and who understands the language of the cosmos. In this way, Thoth infiltrated three of the world's great monotheistic religions, not as a god, but as a prophet, a seer, a primordial teacher. His wisdom was smuggled in under new names, clothed in new doctrines, but his essence was intact. He was still the one who knows, the scribe of heaven, the voice of order. This infiltration wasn't accidental. It reflects a deep psychological truth that humanity needs a figure like Thoth, a guardian of knowledge, a keeper of mysteries, a being who does not dominate with thunder or fire, but who quietly records, heals, teaches, and intercedes. Thoth is not the god of fear, but of clarity. He is not the tyrant, but the witness. In an age of confusion, deception, and chaos, Thoth becomes more relevant than ever. Because his power is not brute strength, it is understanding. And understanding, once attained, cannot be taken away. Even in the Renaissance, when Europe rediscovered the Hermetic texts, Thoth's influence surged again. Thinkers like Marsilio Ficino and Giordano Bruno revered Hermes Trismegistus as a source of ancient wisdom that predated Plato and Moses. They believed his teachings contained a divine science that could unlock the secrets of the universe. Alchemists copied his symbols. Philosophers quoted his aphorisms. Secret societies adopted his name. And in all of it, Thoth was present, not as a relic of the past, but as a living current flowing beneath the surface of Western esotericism. His legacy became the foundation of what we now call the occult. Yet, for all the lofty interpretations, Thoth also remained personal. He was the god of scribes, and scribes are human. People who write, think, and create. In ancient Egypt, scribes would keep shrines to Thoth in their workspaces, honoring him before beginning a task. They saw him not just as a cosmic figure, but as a partner in their daily practice. Every word written was an offering. Every sentence a ritual. Even today, whether we recognize it or not, when we write with intention, when we speak truthfully, when we seek understanding, we invoke Thoth. We step into his current. We become, for a moment, scribes of the divine. And this is perhaps his greatest gift, that he continues to call to those who seek. He does not demand worship. He does not punish the ignorant. He simply waits for the curious, the hungry, the brave, those who dare to learn, those who feel that words have power, that symbols can open doors, that knowledge can transform reality. Thoth is not hidden. He is everywhere, in every library, in every whisper of intuition, in every symbol you can't stop thinking about, in the moonlight that falls on an open page. He is not behind us, but beside us, guiding the hand that dares to write its own fate. In the end, Thoth proves that gods do not die. They evolve. They migrate. They adapt. Their temples may fall, their statues may crumble, but if their essence speaks to something eternal in the human soul, they survive. Not as fantasies, but as forces. Not as myths, but as mirrors. Thoth has survived every empire, every book burning, every translation error, every erasure, because he lives in the act of knowing, the act of naming, the act of remembering. He is the god of the threshold, the bridge between chaos and order, the moment when silence becomes speech. And as long as that moment exists, Thoth endures. So if you find yourself drawn to the mysteries, to sacred geometry, to its ancient texts, to the power of language, to the hidden forces behind the veil, then perhaps Thoth is already with you. Perhaps you are already in his temple. Not of stone, but of thought. Not of incense, but of intention. Perhaps he waits for you to pick up the pen, or to speak the name, or to read between the lines. Perhaps he never left. In the end, Thoth remains one of the most astonishing survivors of ancient religious thought. His story is not one of decline, but of transformation. Not one of fading away, but of reappearing in new forms, always relevant, always wise, always waiting. Whether as a god of Egypt, a sage of Greece, a prophet of Islam, or a symbol in the hands of the modern occultist, Thoth continues his work. He records. He reveals. He teaches. He heals. And he reminds us that knowledge is sacred, language is magic, and truth, however hidden, is always worth seeking.